Hello, dear friends. Today we continue our acquaintance with the memoirs of the Wehrmacht general. In this part, we will learn about his opinion on his personal meeting with Hitler after the disaster near Moscow. Don't forget to rate the video, and let's get started. February 12th, 1942. Letter to his wife. Spas, Demensk. Here are a few more pages from the diary. Put them with the rest. Yesterday I met with Field Marshal Kluge. He was in a surprisingly cheerful mood, even though he also has a lot on his mind. But he is not in the immediate vicinity of what is happening. The pages of the diary describe only military matters. How impressive and nerve-wracking these situations are at the moment. They cannot describe that. And the worst thing is that in our position, there is no feeling that anything will change. February 16th. Letter to his wife. Yesterday I received your letter dated January 23rd, surprisingly quickly. I can't say anything yet about Gisela's confirmation and my attendance at it. God willing, the fierce Russian attacks will stop before then. So far they are attacking us every day, like wild beasts, with ferocity, persistence, even desperation, as never before. February 16th. Diary entry. On February 14th, to our surprise, we learned that Field Marshal Kluge had ordered the 2nd Panzer Army to advance on Maklaki and Kosmachovo. We were not informed of this. We only found out about it by chance, from an accidental report. Thus our agreement with the 2nd Panzer Army was broken. The gap near Kirov remained open, and the enemy, which we believed to be concentrated there, retained the ability to advance northeast on the highway. I called the field marshal and asked him to change his order to the 2nd Tank Army. He was very angry. The proposal and wish of the Land Forces Command to join forces near Mazalsk turned out to be a complete utopia. On a 1 to 300,000 map, it looks like a theoretically sound idea, but not in our current situation. Surrounded, almost in a cauldron, divisions with regiments of 100 to 200 men, who can only repel the enemy's frenzied attacks with extreme effort. For example, the 31st Division, holding 17 kilometers of the front, withstood 73 attacks. The 131st Division, holding 11 kilometers, withstood 53 attacks by forces larger than a company between January 21 and February 16th, with its own losses amounting to 530 killed, 1,400 wounded, and 1,100 frostbitten. Then Kluge proposed a small compromise, and this option is currently beyond our means. However, it would be extremely inconvenient for him to back away from this compromise and deprive the top brass of hope. He vented all his anger on General von Unruh, who was at hand and had failed to keep his promise. Overall, this was also unfounded. In the end, he decided to call General Schmidt again and ask him about the matter. As a result of the negotiations, he finally agreed to my proposal. It is a miracle that the army still exists. We would not have been able to hold out on our own if the enemy had acted correctly. He thought we were finished, and believed that the forces at his disposal to strike at our rear could achieve even greater goals. He forgot that a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. This is the reason why everything has turned out well to this day. But we, as humans, had no influence on this reason. A higher power intervened here, dictating the meaning of existence. Without him, our situation would have become a fact that we could not have done anything about. And for example, another miracle. Despite the enemy's efforts, traffic on the highway continues. He can shell the road, but right in front of his guns, truck after truck passes by. Many of them are hit by shells, but most of them make it through. Although in general, this situation is unbearable for the army. Finally, reinforcements have begun to arrive. How long we have waited, hoped and prayed that they would finally finally arrive. They are completely insufficient, but it's better than nothing. After all, our divisions are practically depleted. February 19th, letter to my wife. With heavy losses on both sides, we managed to temporarily get rid of the threat of encirclement. In 4 places where the enemy wanted to cut off our oxygen, he was destroyed. After we calculated the number of divisions standing in our rear based on interrogations of prisoners of war, we felt like a horseman on Lake Constance. The threat was much more serious than I had imagined. It is now perfectly clear to us why, given the number and location of our army's forces, the Russians had written us off. According to human understanding, this should have been the end for us. Only thanks to God's help and the bravery of our troops did everything turn out differently. In one area, mentioned in the latest Wehrmacht report as a forest 80 kilometers southeast of Vyazma, 3.5 encircled Russian divisions were defeated after a week of fighting. For 5 days in the snow, without food or shelter, the men sat in a kind of snow fortress in the forest, under constant fire from our artillery, and their numbers dwindled. They say that 3,500 were killed. It must have been a terrible sight. I myself will not go there. It is too disgusting. Something similar happened in other encirclements, but these were only the tips of small pincers, from which we managed to slip away before they finally closed. Much larger pincers still threaten us. Now there is an ominous silence that no one is used to. It is almost more unpleasant than battle because it is unclear what will happen. There are some signs, but no clear conclusions. I pray to God that He will continue to help us. February 21st, letter to my wife. The last few days have been so eventful that I haven't had time to write properly. A very important military maneuver, which we had hoped for with all our hearts, has failed. In our situation, this is extremely unpleasant. The general calm makes us uneasy. The enemy is apparently preparing a major strike. February 23rd is supposed to be Red Army Day. It is possible that they will strike on that day. Hartmut called me the night before last. He was satisfied and in good spirits. He is on the road to Tula, north of Orel. February 25th, letter to my wife. For 2 days now we have been in a state of great anxiety. Once again we find ourselves in a situation that we have experienced many times before and only recently survived. We are fighting for our lifeline, which has been cut off for 48 hours now. Tonight it was freed again, but we don't know for how long. The enemy is close by and, having been repelled by us today, will probably resume their attacks. There is no end in sight. Again and again they throw new people into battle, fresh reinforcements, and in this respect they seem inexhaustible. When you finally extricate yourself from a difficult situation, you don't know what else will go wrong in the near future. It's been 3 months of this kind of life, which is exhausting, depressing, and simply killing. I had to interrupt this letter for 2 hours. Another very bad situation has arisen in another sector. And so it goes on, from crisis to crisis. February 28th, Rastenburg. At 10 a.m., flight on a transport plane, Smolensk-Rastenburg. Arrival at 1 p.m. After lunch with the Führer, discussion of the situation of individual armies. On my part, description of the situation on the highway, enemy pressure from the south and north, airborne brigades. Threat: our supplies may be cut off at any moment. Request for permission to surrender Yuknov. Reason: we need reserves. We must free up troops. Otherwise, the highway, which is being held by hastily assembled formations, will be cut off behind our lines. The life and death of the army depends on the highway. His objection? Then we will have to surrender the Yunov-Gzhatsk road, the only supply route during the muddy season. He is mistaken here. During the rainy season, this road turns into a swamp. It's useless. He is fighting for recognition of his position. He delays the decision. He only agrees after Kluge supports the request at the end of the meeting and describes the Yunov-Gzhatsk road as unusable. The Führer says that it doesn't really matter whether we are 10 kilometers west or east of Yunov. Now that, in his opinion, the front has stabilized, he will not argue over a few kilometers. He may be considered stubborn because until then he had been adamantly opposed to any retreat. This was necessary to stabilize the front as a whole. There were people who believed that our cause was lost. Only by ordering the front line to be held unconditionally was he able to resist panic. In a general sense, this is very correct, but in particular, this view is incorrect. This mistake is the root cause of our constant crises and high losses. The Führer shows great interest in technical details and clearly has a weakness for technology. He believes that anti-tank defenses have such an advantage over tanks that the latter will disappear in 1942. He believes that England is in the same position today as Germany was in 1918. Overall, he radiates incredible confidence. February 28th. Letter to his wife. Hunting lodge near Rastenburg. Today, I and other army commanders were summoned to the Führer to describe our situation and work out a plan of action. At 10 a.m., we flew out of Smolensk and landed at the Führer's headquarters at 1 p.m. For the first time since Trinity Sunday, I am back in Germany, in decent buildings, in an atmosphere of order. It is almost unimaginable. There is a flush toilet and a bathtub, and there are flowers on the table. It is unbelievable. I am now waiting for the phone call with you that I requested. Everyone here is extremely optimistic. Alas, our local situation is much worse now. At the moment, we are under exceptional pressure. What happened today is a breath of fresh air, an opportunity to escape from the constant tension, to distract ourselves from this roller coaster. I hope that things will go as the Führer envisions. Tomorrow morning, a transport plane will take me back to Russia. How I would love to stay in Germany. March 1st, 1942. Letter to his wife. Spas, Demensk. Since yesterday evening, I've been waiting for a telephone connection with Freiburg. There is no connection. I have to leave in 20 minutes. We probably won't have another chance to talk. This makes me very angry. Those guys from the foreign ministry who came here and are probably telling their families how terrible the Russian winter is in Angerberg are constantly calling. None of us could get through because the line was always busy, even though I had reserved an urgent business call. The general understanding here is that, overall, the Russian winter offensive is over, and that we have won a defensive victory that has greatly weakened the enemy. With regard to England, there are hopes, or rather assessments, that due to the defeats inflicted by the Japanese in the Far East, it is now in the same position as we were in the fall of 1918. Well, we'll see. For me, this changes nothing. As Colonel General Halder told me, no one is under as much pressure as I am. Indeed, the Russians have us by the throat. If they advance another 500 meters, we are finished. March 3rd. Letter to his wife. I returned the day before yesterday and immediately flew to the front yesterday on the Stork. The bottleneck that allows access to the core is 4 kilometers wide. At a distance of 500 to 1,000 meters behind the road, the enemy is sitting and firing at our transport with everything they have. It will be days before we can bring in enough forces to stabilize the situation. Although those at the top are generally confident in their assessments, our local situation remains bleak and is causing particular concern these days. The situation repeats itself constantly. We are constantly walking on a razor's edge. It is so exhausting and depressing that it really wears people down. It is quite possible to cope with a huge danger once or twice, but to live constantly in such a situation and know nothing else is an unheard-of burden for any person. And it is hard, very hard to bear. You rejoice every day and every night when nothing bad happens. But then new dangers arise, and in extreme tension, you can only pray to God that He will continue to help. For 3 weeks, winter here was like an erosa, with bright sunshine during the day but nothing melting, and temperatures dropping to minus 25 degrees Celsius at night. We can only hope that the thaw will begin soon, as it will limit the Russians' maneuverability. No one knows when it will begin. Any day between March 15th and April 15th, and a lot can happen before then. March 5th. Letter to my wife. Today, since morning, the Russians have been attacking across the entire front, not only here with us, but also on practically all the main directions. The prisoners of war we have taken say that this offensive should finally become the decisive battle they have been striving for so long. On most of my army's front, this attack was not successful, as we had just withdrawn our troops. I recently made this decision, not without difficulty. While in East Prussia, it turned out to be easier than I thought. I was told that now that the front has stabilized overall, it makes practically no difference whether we are 10 kilometers east or west. With this maneuver, we were able to free up troops to reinforce the most important and weakest sections of the highway. Already today, this has proved to be extremely necessary. Very bad situations have arisen there again. So far, they have been dealt with for the time being, but we are only at the beginning of the battle. It will again last for 14 days. And in our situation, these days will bring enough turmoil and worries. Thank God that after 3 months of winter offensive, the Russians are also exhausted and in a very bad mood. For the first time in many months, we have defectors again. You write that people in Berlin are much calmer and more confident about the war, and that I shouldn't worry so much unnecessarily. Well, I'll tell you this. There is a significant difference between looking at a map with a scale of 1 to 1 million and being right here, at the scene of events, directly experiencing everything that is happening, sharing the dangers, seeing the exhausted state of the troops, feeling the frost at minus 20 degrees, and when almost every day the fighting is not going in our favor, and it is only with great difficulty that we manage to rectify the situation. After all, we have been fighting for 8.5 months now. It has been a continuous battle, and for 3 months we have been in danger of being outflanked and surrounded. Look at the map. The enemy is all around us. As I write this, Russian planes are flying over our positions, and night after night, for 6 weeks in a row, they have been dropping paratroopers behind our lines. No one is stopping them. We don't have the strength to fight back. Soldiers see things more simply because they are only involved in events on a small section of the front. Sometimes a huge threat looms over them, but then everything always calms down. They usually don't even realize the scale of what threatens them. We bear this burden on our shoulders. We must worry about the overall situation and the combat needs of the soldiers. That is the situation. March 6th, morning. Less than 12 hours have passed since the previous entry was written, and our situation has changed for the worse again. Once again, the army is fighting, let's be clear, for its own life. Once again, a strong enemy has cut off the only road, this time on a broad front. Once again, it's a matter of life and death. So, my beloved Truda, things here are very different from how they appear from afar. March 8th, diary entry. Kluge stopped by. We talked about the state of affairs and the plan of action. He listened eagerly to the news from Kirov. He is in very good spirits, praises the thoughtful leadership of the army, and believes that the situation has improved. There have been much worse moments, but even now things are not going smoothly at all. March 9th, diary entry. Looking at the army's positions, I see that its situation is very peculiar. On a 130-kilometer front, it stretches out in a narrow strip with 2 broken corners. The only supply route for 20 kilometers is under direct threat from the enemy. Across the entire rear of the army, pressing down on the narrow strip from behind, are airborne troops, ski battalions, and hordes of partisans. Everywhere you look, there are battles, and night after night, enemy planes fly over our homes and reinforce their army in our rear. We have no strength to resist this. Our rear units are struggling to hold the villages that separate our supply routes from the enemy. This is no longer just an alarming situation. There is a whole new army there, recruited from the population, former prisoners of war, and partisans by officers and commissars delivered by air. There is an abundance of weapons, including artillery, and ammunition in this area after the Battle of the Asma. When you realize all this, you begin to have serious doubts that the enemy will stop its offensive with the arrival of spring. On the contrary, one might get the impression that he thinks, "My plan to destroy the German army during the winter has failed, but I have dealt it a heavy blow. Now is not the time to stop, but rather to continue, and in the summer it will finally come to an end." That's all for today. If you liked the video, please support it with a like and subscribe to the channel. See you all soon.